Good evening. It's Friday night. It's 5 o'clock. I know it's not Cracker Jack, but we do have an absolutely cracking show for you tonight here on the Locker Room. I am your fabulous host, of course. It's me, Graham D, and I am delighted to be joined by Mr. David Smith. David, how's it going?
Hi, very well, Graham. It's been a while since I've been on this, so very good to be on with the troops again.
It's great to have you all, mate, and we have a lot to get through tonight. And we're going to start with last night. Rangers were in Europa League semi-final second leg action, and they are in their first European final for 14 years as they defeated RB Leipzig by 3 goals to 1 on the night, 3 goals to 2 on aggregate. The goals coming from James Tavernier, Glenn Kamara, and a second half goal from John Lundstrom. I watched the game last night. It was an absolutely fabulous night, an absolutely fantastic atmosphere. What an achievement for Rangers last night, David.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were really good. Got the front foot early doors, and that whenever you get the front foot early doors, it obviously helps towards the outcome of the game. Getting a few goals early doors obviously helps towards getting a successful outcome, and that's exactly what Rangers strive for and achieved in the end. And a very good result for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. Now, when Van Bronckhorst came in to Ibrox, I was a little bit conscious about the appointment. I thought Ange Postecoglou Celtic were quickly getting in their stride. Domestically for Rangers, they haven't been good enough. I think a lot of people can note that. I think that's evident to see. But on European terms, I don't buy into the mantra that Rangers have had an easy running because they haven't. They beat Dortmund in the last 32. Terrific achievement beating Dortmund in the last 32. They beat Red Star Belgrade, never easy. Braga wasn't easy. Braga was basically job done in the second leg, which was a fantastic result. Then again, last night they had to ride the storm. First leg wasn't outcome Rangers strived for, but afterwards it was all guns blazing for Rangers and got the job done. And with Celtic being a formality in terms of getting the league wrapped up, probably. I think it's something for Rangers to go and savour now. And they've got a few weeks to go and enjoy themselves before getting back to the nitty gritty and trying to get some silverware. Well, they've got the possibility of the double, of course, to go to the Europa League and the Scottish Cup final.
It was an absolutely amazing night last night. The atmosphere was absolutely fantastic, you have to admit. Was there a particular standout for you for Rangers last night in terms of performance?
Probably John Lundstrom, to be honest. I've been impressed with him, if I'm going to be brutally honest, just because of his way that he gets about the pitch, his ability to get forward, his ability to do defensive work, and he's a really, really good all-round player. He's got a bit of utility about him as well, which I think is a hugely important thing in football, especially in modern football. Yeah, that was just fantastic as far as Lundstrom was concerned. But one thing that I liked from him is he was getting at 6 yard areas as well, and that was a good thing. James Tavernier, I thought, was good again last night. That's 7 goals in 13 games in European terms, if I'm not mistaken. So that's hugely impressive for a right back. And James Tavernier, I seen a thing on Twitter. It was actually from one of my mates, actually. He's a club legend. And I wouldn't disagree with it, to be honest, because he's helped Rangers in terms of reaching the pinnacle, which is the Europa League final. It's the holy grail, which, as far as Rangers is concerned, irrespective of what happens, it kind of acclimatizes what happened 14 years ago. And for me, it's a superb achievement for all involved. And you've also got to remember here, gentlemen, that Rangers 9 years ago were in the fourth tier of Scottish football, playing against Snell and Albion and fought for Athletic and Elgin City. For them to be 9 years later, winning the Premier League and then reaching one of the most elite European Cup finals deserves a pat on the back as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they really did fantastic last night. And I think you can see on your screen here, we are now joined by Mr. James E. James, how's it going?
It's going well. It's a very, very busy day so far today. I've just come off of the Indie Live Radio's election special show because of the council elections in Scotland yesterday. And I was doing a very long interview over a sort of Zoom earlier on today as well, plus putting together the Saturday show for tomorrow. So very, very busy.
You're a very popular man, James. I actually listened to your show earlier. It was very, very good. I enjoyed it. And the music was extremely impressive as well. Obviously, you did your show last night, so I don't know if you managed to see a lot of the Rangers game, but if you did, what did you make of the performance? And you have to say the atmosphere was absolutely electric at Ibrox last night.
Yeah, it was. And a bit like last week, because I had an inkling that I might be on today, I did have it on. Although I was doing the show, I had it on with the volume down. And I thought overall, it was a very, very good performance from Rangers. As you say, the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. Although I must say, when Leipzig scored to, square it up at 2-2, I really thought at that point it was going to go into extra time. And I had still had a sneaky suspicion that Rangers might pull it off even with extra time. But they didn't need it. They managed to get themselves another goal. So as a Celtic supporter, I have to say well done to Rangers from a Scottish football perspective for getting into the final, because it all works well for the coefficient. But in all honesty, I've got no idea how the final will go. I thought they might face West Ham, but of course they lost out to Frankfurt. So it's Scotland and Germany in Seville.
Yeah, I mean, for Rangers to be in the final, I mean, I did think they might get there. I mean, I thought last night would be a difficult game because Leipzig are a very good side. But Dave, you have to say, I mean, Rangers form in Europe and Rangers form in the league is very, very different. In Europe, they're a completely different animal. And, last night they were absolutely fantastic. There was probably about maybe a 10-minute spell just after Leipzig scored where they were causing problems. But to be honest, Rangers were fantastic pretty much all night last night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they've been fantastic across the competition. I mean, I'm going to be brutally honest. I'm going to put a point to you gentlemen, and obviously the viewers out there, that I think if this is a Gerrard team, I don't think Rangers get the job done last night. And I don't think Rangers get the job done across the whole European competition. I think they'll go cash out far earlier than they do. But I mean, for Rangers, they're signed to play in the front foot. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side. The can be exposed at the back, and that's where they will be reluctant. But also in the same token as well, they will be in the front foot. They will be a side that will play with tenacity. They will be a side that will be keen to make a statement whenever they get forward. And that's one thing I've gotten out of Rangers whenever I've seen them this season. And I mean, this was another hugely successful game last night in terms of Rangers, but also it was important that they showed a little mentality, especially after Leipzig scoring, because it was a bit like Braga. It was a carbon copy of the Braga game, because Braga scored in between the goals that Rangers had to go and score. I mean, there was a whole host of permutations involved in last night, those of that Braga game, and it was pretty much similar permutations. And the fact that Rangers showed a terrific mentality in both of those games deserves great gratitude from myself.
Yeah, I think if you look at the game overall yesterday, I mean, actually, there was a really good chance for Rangers to go 3 up because there was an absolute sitter from Joe Rebo. But, they never let that affect them. They were absolutely excellent last night. And I have to say as well, I think it was Joe Rebo that got a head injury as well. So I hope that he's okay. It looked a very nasty injury. But, James, you have to say, Rangers in the final, the first time in 14 years. And, as much as they've just beaten a German side, they will surely fancy their chances in that final against Eintracht Frankfurt.
Absolutely, because as Dave said, and you have said, their domestic form and their European form have been two totally different things. And I wouldn't bet against them pulling it off. I don't follow a lot of German football, so I don't know how much better Frankfurt may be than Leipzig. But over the two games, I thought Leipzig would be the winners, and Rangers managed to pull it off. So I wouldn't write them off of actually taking the trophy.
Dave, is it kind of, I mean, the fact that they have basically not had a striker, they've not had Morelos, they've not had Kemar Roof, and they still managed to get to the final, that has to be absolutely fantastic for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, surely.
Yeah, but I'm going to approach it a different way by saying that this Rangers side, and Celtic for that matter as well, are designed to play games in a totally different format, to a totally different dimension. And that's exactly what Van Bronckhorst has done. I mean, no Morelos, no Roof. It's about picking up the pieces. It's about sorting out a jigsaw puzzle. It's the part and parcel of being a manager. You'll always get injuries. It was just quite unfortunate for Van Bronckhorst that he got injuries in quite key areas. But the players that have came in and done their job. They've picked up their wage, and they've justifiably picked up their wage with some top performances. Ryan Kent's been coming in and doing really well. I think the injuries to an extent has also helped. Like so, John Lundstrom helped better his game. And it's also helped the likes of Ryan Jack. Ryan Jack's I think has been superb since coming back. Also, one player that we haven't mentioned yet in 10 minutes, I think Scott Wright's had a pivotal part to play in this Rangers side because of the injuries. And I think if Scott Wright's not in this team, I think Rangers don't get the results that they get in the last few weeks. Scott Wright had a major part to play on Sunday against Celtic, and then a major role to play against last night. So I think the contributions of certain players, especially Scott Wright, can't be undermined as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I was going to go on to that actually. Scott Wright was very good last night. He caused a lot of problems for Leipzig. He was running in behind, and his movement was very impressive all night. And again, I thought for me, James, one of the best players for me watching that game last night was Calvin Bassey. I thought he was absolutely fantastic yesterday.
It's quite difficult for me to comment on individual sort of performances because, as I say, I was doing a live radio show, so I was kind of half watching the game on TV. But my overall opinion and a take from the game was that as a team, I think they all played particularly well. I honestly couldn't say, I'm going to say, this player was the best player on the night or whatever, because I couldn't genuinely do that. But I think they came together as a team and they did a terrific job of taming RB Leipzig, who apparently, I seen somebody had, I think it was on Twitter, somebody had said that apparently Leipzig were supposed to be the best team playing away, in Europe. Well, they didn't look it last night.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some comments coming in here. So Gordon McIntosh says, "Hi guys, hope you're all good." We are very good, Gordon. Thank you for joining in. For anybody that's watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, feel free to comment on anything we're talking about. You can see at the bottom of the screen here all the things that we're going to be talking about in these 2 hours. We've got a very, very busy show, but we always like to hear your comments and hear your views. So drop us a message and we'll read them out on air. As long as they're clean, of course. We don't want reading anything nasty out. But let's talk about the atmosphere last night. Dave, the atmosphere at Ibrox last night, straight from the first minute, was absolutely brilliant. That's what European nights can be like at, Parkhead, Ibrox, Tynecastle. That was a special night for Rangers last night.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever Rangers are in action, especially in European terms, the crowd always helps. They're always a 12, 13, 14, even 15th man, and they were very much so again last night. But also, I had that feeling that the whole crowd just amplified massively last night, and that was the main thing that came out of it, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, yeah, the Rangers fans just helped drive the place. They needed the fans, and what I found interesting was when the goals went in, they had the telegraphic view, and it just looked absolutely brilliant. And then the scenes at the final whistle was just absolutely tremendous. And as I said, a great achievement for a Scottish club to be getting to a European Cup final. I don't agree with fans at other clubs that are wanting Leipzig to win just because they support a certain club. I'm a big believer that if a Scottish club's doing well in Europe, you go and support them. So even if it's Celtic doing well as a Rangers fan, you go and support Celtic. Yeah, it might not. Yeah, it might be absolutely brutal. Yeah, it might be cruel to the system. Yeah, it might be cruel to the heart. But ultimately, we need to help that coefficient up there. It's not right, can we get it bang in the middle? It's about getting teams in the Champions League as far as I'm concerned. It's about getting teams in European football as far as I'm concerned. I think the amalgamation of the Conference Leagues helped massively in that part because you've had Aberdeen doing well, not doing well in Europe, but you've had Aberdeen having opportunities, Johnson opportunities, and you've had other Scottish clubs getting opportunities as well. Also, this season, you've got the Ross County United getting the possible opportunity, even Motherwell may add as well, getting the opportunity to go into the European Football League term. And also, it's helped in terms of the Conference League where Roma beat Leicester last night. I don't think such a situation arises otherwise.
Yeah, James, we are rightly giving credit to Rangers because they deserve it. They were absolutely fantastic last night. The run in Europe's been sensational. They're in the final. But were you a little bit surprised at Leipzig's kind of game plan last night? Because I didn't really look as if they kind of had one. Now, I know a lot of that's down to the fact Rangers played very well, but you were surprised that Leipzig were a little bit they weren't really at it last night?
Yeah, well, over the two games, as I said, I honestly felt that Leipzig would have beaten Rangers over the two games. I was surprised that they only got the 1-0 in the first leg. And when they got it back to 2-2 overall, I thought it's going to go to extra time, but I had a feeling that Rangers would do it even with the extra time. And I've been disappointed in Leipzig. When you think how much money has gone into that club, and theoretically the players that they have should be better than Rangers and therefore should win the game. But you know what? Cup football is a strange beast. You know, you can have a team of absolute rank amateurs coming up against the best professionals on the planet, when the best professionals could still lose. And it was very much a David and Goliath situation last night. And Goliath was felled once more.
I could have put it better myself. Dave, in terms of Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, he is 90 minutes away, potentially exceeding some penalties, from winning a European trophy. Now, a lot of Rangers fans maybe weren't convinced at the start when he came in for Steven Gerrard. If he goes on to win this trophy, just how big is this going to be for not just Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, but Rangers as well?
I think massive. I mean, a lot of people looked at Gerrard, and although he did win the trophy, the Premiership for Rangers and stopped 10 in a row, a lot of people will also look at it on the flip side and say he didn't exactly achieve enough at that club as far as people are concerned. And he did frustrate a lot of Rangers fans, but still, Gerrard spent 3 times the budget Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has at that club, and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was somehow under intense pressure because Rangers demand winning football matches every Saturday. Anything but is an absolute crisis. And for me, he's handled it well. Domestically, yeah, it's not been great. Thoroughly understand that. European terms, nobody should be batting an island. Yes, Celtic will likely go win the league now. Fair play, right? Fair play. Would I rather win the Scottish Premiership rather than Europa League? 100%, because it's the bread and butter of winning in domestic football in your country. But in the same token as well, it's an opportunity to win a massive European trophy. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, if he gets the job done in a few weeks' time, which feels like just tomorrow, sorry, it'll be fantastic. And for him, he'll put Scottish football on the map. I think Scottish football got a massive pick me up last night, and if Rangers could go and get the job done, it's a dynasty for Scottish football.
James, in terms of this final against Eintracht Frankfurt, given the teams that Rangers have beat, would they be favourites for this now?
I think possibly, in inverted commas, the smart money will make Frankfurt slight favourites. But if you're looking on from the outside and you're not really following either team, based on the performances that Rangers have put in the Europa League this season, for me, I would say they're probably just a little bit more favourites in my mind than Frankfurt. But as I said, I've not really seen Frankfurt playing that often, so it's difficult to judge. But certainly based on what Rangers have done in Europe, for me, I would make them slight favourites.
Dave, I think it's fair to say that, I think we know that Celtic are probably going to win the league. So is this now just a case of Rangers putting all the eggs in this European basket? And also, they've still got the Scottish Cup final to come as well on the 21st of May.
Absolutely. I mean, they can go and play the under-12s considering it's Sunday now. It's that good an achievement from Rangers. I think they put all their eggs into one basket. They concentrate the Europa League final first and foremost, and then they've got the added incentive of making a hugely successful season by beating Hearts. I think if they win one out of the two, I think if they win either or, I still think it's a good season. Not exactly an excellent season, but a good season. And I mean, either side, Rangers, we'll be looking at this by saying we want to win 2 trophies now. If Van Bronckhorst can win 2 trophies, massive springboard ahead of next season because Celtic have been rejuvenated under Ange Postecoglou and they're far more formidable outfit than they were 12 months ago. Celtic were rock bottom 12 months ago. Celtic have risen from the dead to an extent. Not the same thing didn't happen to Rangers, but in terms of Rangers, they are a bigger animal now. A bigger animal than they were at Christmas time. And that's helped them potentially get the double.
Let's be honest, James, I don't think a few weeks ago, even months ago, anybody really could have imagined that Rangers would be in this position where they'd be in a Scottish Cup final and a European final. You know, the job that G. Van Bronckhorst has done, I think you have to admire him for it because he's done a very good job there.
I think he's been absolutely excellent. And to go back to, when you were talking about Steven Gerrard, I think part of the thing when Gerrard became the Rangers manager, there was this perception that they had taken potentially a Premier League manager up to Rangers Football Club, although he had never managed in the Premier League, just because of his whole reputation. I think in the minds of some, he was being viewed that way. In many ways, it was an experiment, let's be honest, because he was an untried manager. Obviously had good points and had bad points, and the real good point, of course, was him winning the Scottish Premiership last season by such a huge margin. Had he remained and not left midway through the season, do you know what? I kind of agree with Dave. I don't think Rangers would have done as well in Europe under Steven Gerrard as they did when Van Bronckhorst came in, because he completely, well, in my opinion, he completely changed how they were playing, especially in Europe, and they became much harder to break down. They became a stronger defensive unit. And by the same token, when you think of how frail they were defensively in the Premier League, it's just, I can't get my head around it. I honestly can't. I can't see how a team could be so strong at the back in Europe and yet crumble so easily in the Scottish Premier League.
Dave, I think in terms of Van Bronckhorst, when you look at when he came in, the first thing he had to deal with was the fact that he had his captain saying that players had lost hunger. Now, okay, they're not going to win the league, but they've certainly got a lot of that hunger back now, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, not winning the league for Rangers is, if Rangers win the double, I may add, is a small slap in the wrist. It's nothing else. I mean, I would rather compensate as much as you want to win your bread and butter, which is the Scottish Premiership title. If Rangers go win the double, they'll look at that and go, great season. I mean, Rangers will always have that expectation on both levels, both in domestic and European football. But I mean, Rangers have been excelling themselves in the second half of the season. The first half of the season, they were still getting the job done, but they were nothing accelerated as such. And then Rangers, in some games in the second half of the season, were, the league especially, were a side that were getting on the front foot in games, but just didn't have that final line or cynical finish about them to go and see the job through. Manels had a huge part to play in that. He did look a little sharper under Van Bronckhorst, and then he picked up the injury. Fashion Sakala is one player that I've been impressed with under Van Bronckhorst. I think he's came on to a game. He's got into good areas. He's banged in a few important goals, and he's been a key player for Van Bronckhorst since he arrived back in November.
We will be back on before Rangers play that European final, but I'm going to get your predictions now. So I'm going to come to you first, James. Do you think Rangers will lift the European trophy against Eintracht Frankfurt?
Yes, I think they will, and I think it will be by a goal.
Dave, what's your thoughts on that?
2-1 Rangers.
And I'm going to say, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, I hope this game goes to extra time and penalties. I don't mind who wins it, but I think Rangers might. But I want Rangers to be absolutely knackered so Hearts can win the Scottish Cup a few days later. That's all I want. Rangers can win it, I don't mind. As long as they're absolutely knackered, I'm happy with that. But I do think Rangers will win it, to be honest. I'm going to say 2-1 Rangers, I think. So let's
be on the fence there, Graham, and
well, I was thinking about it, but I better not. I better be honest here. But let's move on to the 6 Premiership games this weekend. And we'll start with tomorrow. the first game is 12 o'clock, and it is at Celtic Park, and it is Celtic against Heart of Midlothian. Before I talk about Hearts, let's go on to what happened there. Before we talk about the Jambos, let's talk about Celtic. James, Celtic aren't quite there yet, but you have to think that a win tomorrow, and they are pretty much guaranteed to win the title.
Yeah, I suppose you could even say if they drew tomorrow, it's not going to make a huge difference. Obviously you want them to win it. Whatever games are remaining, you want them to win and win in style. I was, in all honesty, I didn't realise that the game was a lunchtime kickoff tomorrow. I was thinking it was at 3 o'clock, and I was looking forward to getting along there after my show tomorrow. And it was just I was on Sky Sports yesterday afternoon, and they kind of brought up an advert for it, and I was like, what? So I fired off an email immediately to Sky Sports demanding that they change the kickoff time till after 1 o'clock when my show is finished. So far, I've not heard anything back from them, so I'm assuming that they're not going to change it.
I somehow doubt that, yeah. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt, and this actually ties in with what I was going to talk about as well, the fact that, Celtic are pretty much cleaned up at the award ceremony. Ange Postecoglou, Player of the Year. They've got Callum McGregor. Ange Postecoglou, Manager of the Year. Callum McGregor, Player of the Year. You have to say, Dave, what an incredible achievement first season for Ange Postecoglou it's been.
Yeah, it's been consistent, first and foremost. And there was a lot of doubters, understandably so, but that doubters was because nobody had a backline to buy on through Ange Postecoglou, because they didn't know a lot about him, and that was the bottom line with this. I mean, Ange Postecoglou came in with his own pedigree. He's had a really, really good track record in football. And the stumbling block for a lot of Celtic fans at that precise moment in time was the fact that he didn't stay at clubs long enough. But I think Ange Postecoglou's came into Celtic and been totally dynamic about his approach. He's brought in a few players from across Oceania. He's kept a few Australian players that were there present at the club. He's moulded them into fantastic footballers. He's also had the privilege of maintaining a good nucleus of a squad, but also building in that. And that's been the most important thing for me. And I think it's a formality to get the league wrapped up now. They've got Hearts done yet above all then. And that's not 3 games they're going to go and lose. For me, that's games which we're targeting 100% record, and then refresh for the summer. They're back in probably with Champions League football to look forward to, which would be huge for Celtic Football Club, because obviously from a Scottish football persuasion, we've not had a group stage participant for a long time, and for Celtic to go and do this would be a significant milestone, I think, for Scottish football, and a sign that we're back. Because Scottish football, I remember in the early noughties to 2010s period, you'd be watching different games on STV or ITV on a Tuesday and Wednesday night every second week, and it'd be Rangers or Celtic on the television alongside the Man United or a Liverpool or a Chelsea, and it would be one of those that you would just love to go and see again. I'm a bit of an old school traditionalist, and I think we need a bit of Scottish football on our telly again on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, not a Thursday night game.
James, if you look at the Celtic Rangers game last week, I mean, Celtic in the first half were very good. They could have had the game basically wrapped up, but then second half, it was a game of 2 halves. What did you make of that game last week?
It's something that I've noticed happening quite a few times throughout the season, where Celtic come out of the traps really, really quickly, and get a goal or a couple of goals. And then they kind of seem to go off the gas, take their foot off the gas a little bit in the second half. And I don't know why that should have happened. I mean, really, they should have been about 3-0 up at half-time last week, and that should have been the game over and done with. But they missed, a few chances. Maida missed a couple of really good chances. So they came out in the second half. There was only that one goal. And as a supporter, for me, you're always nervy when you're only in front by a goal, whether it's 1-0 or 2-1, whatever it may be, because it just takes the other side to get a goal to make it more interesting. And I think as soon as Rangers got their equaliser, they did look like the team that potentially could have gone on and won that game. And I'm not saying it would have been a disaster, but it would have certainly been a huge dent in the Celtic move forward.
I wanted to ask you about one of the Celtic players, Rio Hetati. Now, when he first came, he looked a very, very good player. Obviously, he scored the goal at Tynecastle. He scored those 2 goals against Rangers at Parkhead. I think he's a good player, but for me, I don't know if he still seems to lack that bit of match fitness, because he seems to tire very easily.
I don't think it's so much lacking in match fitness. I think it's the fact that he came direct from a full season with Japan, in the Japanese league, the J League, and was straight in to, the hurly-burly of the Scottish Premiership. And I think it's starting to tell on him now. I do believe that certainly if you get 30, if you get 45 minutes out of him, you've got plenty of people in the background there that could come in, and deputise. So I would be saying, give him 45 minutes, either the first 45 or the second 45, just to keep him ticking over. But then when you think about it, Maida was exactly the same. He came on the back of, a full season in the J League, but that guy just never ever seems to be turned off. He's constantly at it from the first minute to the last minute. And it's not just he's a player, being a forward, a lot of forwards will stay up and, the halfway line or the opposition half if they can. But he will run all the way back, Maida, put in a tackle, and then charge up the other end of the field again in the hope that he's going to get a pass that's going to get a goal. So I really don't know how he does it. But I think Hetati will benefit from a summer break, and then we'll come back, refreshed for next season.
Dave, in terms of Celtic, obviously they're probably going to win the league this season. They've already won the League Cup. If you're Ange Postecoglou, are you looking at a run in Europe next season? Because obviously this season has been a massive disappointment. So is that expectation to be better in Europe next season?
The bread and butter undoubtedly will be to go win the league next year, but in the same token as well, I do agree with what you're saying. They will be striving for a good Champions League run. They have been disappointed in the Champions League in the Europa Conference League this season, beg your pardon. But I think next season, I think the Celtic team are growing massively. And I've got to clarify they were also in the Europa League from August to Christmas time as well, so before Celtic fans jump on my back here. But in terms of Celtic, I mean, it's been about building blocks for Ange Postecoglou as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, they underachieved to a large proximity in European football, but the same sense as well, it was always about building. Let's remember, Celtic were rock bottom 12 months ago. The last time Celtic reached the Champions League or did very, very well in European terms, arguably, would be Brendan Rodgers. Neil Lennon did reach the last 16 with a tremendous victory at Lazio and has to be hugely commended in my eyes. But also, I think this is an opportunity for a fresh chapter. Let's get the job done, get the league title sewn up on the next season, get a good run in the Champions League, get some income into the club, play a Barcelona, play a Man City, play a Real Madrid, play a Liverpool, and then create your own nights. Create the nights like Rangers did last night. Be the 12th man. And Celtic, I remember the Tony Watts Super Show against Barcelona. Celtic Park was jumping that night. Helped a 2-1 win. Against the Barcelona side, they had Messi, Ronaldinho, Xavi, Puyol, Victor Valdez, world class players. And then at the time, 19-year-old Tony Watt banged in the winner. Well, this big man will run out and United, but it shows what can be done.
James, in terms of Ange Postecoglou, what has impressed you most about him this season?
I think the way that he's so calm, when he's being interviewed at the end of a game. And let's be honest, commentators, part of their job is to try and get him to say something, that is going to be ever so slightly controversial, but he doesn't rise to the bait, and he's also very good when it comes to, giving the accolade to the opposition, if they've played particularly well. I don't think I've ever heard them saying, oh no, they were absolutely rubbish and we were far superior and we should have had, double figures and all this kind of stuff. I just don't think he's like that. And even when you watch him during the games, he's not really a demonstrable manager. He's not jumping up and down on the touchlines. So you kind of look at him and you think, has his heart in it? But you can tell that his heart is in it, because he wants the club to do really, really well. And the fans have taken him, to their hearts, without a doubt, considering, as Dave said, when he was appointed, very few, if anyone, really knew who he was. I mean, I had an inkling of him because of what he'd done with the Australian national team, and I do watch, the Japanese league now and again, so I had a reasonably good idea about him. But I still went and did a bit of research myself to really, be sure that it was the same sort of person. But I think gets this season over and done with, wins the Scottish Premier League, as Dave says, gets into the Champions League next season. A couple of really good signings in the summer. And I think, getting into the last 16 of the Champions League, depending on the draw, and it is all about, the draw, then that might not be out with his capabilities. I don't really count the European adventure this season that highly because it was all pretty new to him. So, I'm not that bothered about the fact that it never ran particularly well. For me, it's always about winning the Premier League in Scotland and getting to the Champions League, whether that's the qualification, rounds, or as apparently is going to happen this time round. If Celtic win the Premier League in Scotland, they're going to go straight into the group stage in the Champions League, which, would be huge, huge.
In terms of tomorrow against Hearts, I'm going to throw this question out to you both. Do you know the last time Hearts won a league game at Celtic Park?
I think it was 1832. No, in all honesty, Graham, I cannot recall.
To be fair, you were close.
I really can't recall. Even historically, I couldn't bring it to mind.
I'll tell you, it was April 2007. Hearts won 3-1. In the last 21 visits to Celtic Park, Hearts have lost 20. We've drawn 1, we've scored 8, and we've conceded 60. So I'm expecting nothing really from tomorrow.
Was it George Bowen that was manager of that game in question?
No, it wasn't. He was away by then. He was away quite early. I think it might have been a Catchup who was in charge that day.
Was not no, I was going to say John McGlynn, but it wasn't John McGlynn. What was your man that had the heart attack on the golf course, managed Hearts, and also did the spell at Dunfermline?
Oh, Jeffries. Jim Jeffries.
Jim Jeffries. Was it not him?
I think it might actually have been possibly Vardas Ivanauskas, another Lithuanian, I think, possibly. But to be honest, I mean, that has just done a horrendous record. It doesn't surprise me. But I was thinking about this earlier. Now, for me, this is a game that Hearts have nothing to lose. We're third in the league. We've got that wrapped up. So I would be going out there tomorrow and I'll be having a go. Just go there and just think, do you know what? We can relax. We can play our football and have a go. There's nothing to lose. I don't know if Robbie will do that, but I do know as well that we do have quite a few players coming back into the team. I know that John Suter's back from injury. Craig Halkett might be back for the cup final. So, Dave, if you are Robin Nielsen, given the fact that what I've just said there, you've got nothing to lose, do you go for it tomorrow?
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect game for Hearts as far as I'm concerned because of everything you've touched on there. And also, I look at this game by saying all the pressures are Celtic tomorrow. Hearts haven't had a pressure consumed to them this season as far as I'm concerned. I think they've exceeded expectations to an extent because not a lot of people expected Hearts to finish third this year. a lot of people expected Hearts to be in the top 6, but not completely third, and third to a large extent. They've been brilliant. They've been consistent all season. They've shown a resilience in games. There's been games where they've won by the dog in 1 or 2-0. That's always a better victory to have than winning 4 or 5-0. It's always a better outcome than losing 2-1 when you're playing absolutely brilliantly. So nobody else has been brilliant for me this season. And I know yourself, Graham, and a number of Hearts fans 14 months ago were very much on the Nielsen out, Fred. Now it's completely different. And I must say, Hearts are a real good place right now. They've had a lot of troubles in the last decade, but Hearts are a different animal now. They're a different component, and they can just enjoy the last 3 games. It's cup final haven for Hearts now.
Graham,
never...
can I ask you, do you think there would be the potential for Robbie Nielsen over the next couple of games before the cup final to rest some of the guys that have been sort of playing week in and week out and bring in, fresher legs, just based on the fact that, these 2 games before the final don't really mean a lot in terms of league position?
I think he should. I think there's a very good chance that he will. Maybe not tomorrow because it is Celtic Park, but as I say, I would really go for it tomorrow. But Motherwell Rangers' last 2 games, I would probably be resting players. I don't think we need to play them. Give them a chance to get a bit of a breather, especially like Barry Mackay, Liam Boyce, Ellis Sims. We need those guys for the cup final. Now, I do know that there is a potential that John Shooter, Craig Halkett, Stephen Kingsley will be back for the cup final, which is massive. So I would be playing a few players that maybe haven't had a lot of chances this season, and give them a run out. And listen, the way that things are going just now, the injuries we've had, we might need these guys for the cup final. But yeah, for me, it's a chance to rest a few players, bring a few players in that haven't had a lot of game time. And I think, words I never thought I'd hear on this show, Robbie Nielsen's been brilliant. I never thought I'd be saying that myself, but he has been very impressive this season. I can't deny that. So I think, this season for me, Dave's right. Last season, I was calling for Nielsen's head after the Borough Rangers, and I think rightly so, because that was an absolute embarrassment. But what he's done this season, him and Joe Savage, the recruitment, I talked about this last week, recruitment has been so important, and I think it is massive for any team, and I think he's got it right. And I think going into this cup final in a few weeks' time, it's a massive chance to win a Scottish Cup, and if he does that, it's been an incredible season.
Yeah, I think the players, for this season and the season before are kind of night and day in a lot of ways, in terms of the quality. And obviously the fact that they're in, third position, they're into Europe, that should help to recruit players, for the season to come after the summer. So I would feel that you'd be looking for Hearts to move forward in that respect.
I'm going to put this question to both of you. I'm going to ask James first. I'm going to ask Dave first. Dave, next season, Hearts obviously have 3rd place this season. We're in European football. We've got 3rd place. I'm obviously a massive Hearts fan, but if you were a Hearts fan, what would your expectation level be for next season? Because can it get any better than this?
Same again, but try and get to the group stage of the Europa League, is it?
Well, we've got the playoff of Europa League. If we get beaten that, we're in the group stage of the Conference League.
Right, so you European football regardless.
Yeah.
My expectation would be 3rd place Premiership, get to semi-final of a cup, and last 16 of either Europa League or Conference League. Either or, you're going to get respite with 3rd place irrespective. So for me, try and get to the last 16 of a European competition.
James, do you think it's out with the realms of possibility? And I'll be honest, I think this myself. Do you think it's out with possibility that Hearts could potentially challenge Celtic and Rangers next season?
I'm tempted to say no, just because I think, that is really where they should be aiming for. Yes, get a decent run in Europe, etc. Get into a cup semi-final domestically. I don't see it being beyond them to continue to be the 3rd place team. But domestically, yes, but it would be very difficult. Let's be honest. the amount of money that Rangers are going to make out of this current run, in Europe, and if they are lucky enough to win the Europa League, then they're going to go into the Champions League, and it's like 40 odd million quid, that kind of level of money. And Hearts can't compete at that end of the scale in terms of if they were spending that on players. But yes, I would think that they should be thinking to themselves, we've got to push to try and get second. Because I think you should always be looking to go that little bit step further than what you've done previously. But if they ended up being third next season, and as Dave said, getting a decent run in either the Europa or the Conference League, and getting a cup or a couple of cup semis, it would be another fantastic season.
It would be, honestly. I'm excited to see what we're going to do next season, especially with the fact we're going to get money for these European games, which is massive. We're going to have big nights at Tynecastle. I can't wait. But predictions for tomorrow, Dave, Celtic against Hearts.
Aye. 3-0 Celtic.
And James.
I thought that was going to be your prediction, Dave. Aye. Yeah, I'm going to go 3-0 for Celtic as well. I'm fully expecting that to be the case because I think that Celtic will go out there and basically say, right, this game, that's it, sewn up.
Yeah, and given our record at Celtic Park, I hate saying this, but I'm going to say 4-0 Celtic, but it's a game I don't really care about because we've got third place, so it's fine. Gordon McIntosh is coming saying, without massive investment, I doubt they can do better. Even with the Euro run next year, Hearts will struggle with the amount of games, etc., without a good few decent players added. It's a fair point because Hearts are going to potentially be playing 50 games next season, which is huge, so we need a bigger squad. Let's move on to another one of the games tomorrow. Now, for any Hibs and Aberdeen fans that are watching this, you can chime in here because this is about you guys. So tomorrow, Easter Road, Hibernian against Aberdeen. Now, before I come to yourself, Dave, I'm going to come to you first, James. Let's start with Hibs. It's been an absolutely terrible season for Hibs. They're sitting 8th in the league. I think if you asked anyone at the start of the season, they would have thought Hibs and Aberdeen would be fighting along with Hearts for this European place. But it's just been a really poor season for Hibs.
Yeah, and likewise Aberdeen. They've not had the best season either. It really is, in the classic terms, a dead rubber, that game tomorrow. It doesn't mean anything for either team whoever wins in terms of, success, other than winning the game. I think Hibs will probably sneak it. I think they'll probably sneak it 1-0. Because I think from a management point of view, I think Jim Goodwin's probably thinking to himself, right, I'm going to have these guys coming in, next year, and we're going to build for next season because there really isn't anything left to play for this season.
In terms of managers, we know that Roy Keane has pulled out, which I'm gutted about because I wanted to see him at Easter Road. It would be brilliant. I mean, where do Hibs go from here? Who's going to get that job?
I did see something online. I think it was either this morning or yesterday morning. Darren Ferguson apparently was interviewed. I think it said, and he did quite well with Peterborough. But I don't know. Personally, I think they want to get themselves, in inverted commas, an older manager. Somebody with a bit more experience, but who still has his finger on the pulse of current football. I think it would be a mistake to get somebody else who's again, in inverted commas, a young manager. So somebody that's like only in his 30s, I think that's a no-no. Even somebody in his early 40s possibly might not be good enough. I think they should be looking at somebody mid-40s up.
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's free.
Go for Brendan Rodgers.
Dave, in terms of Hibs, I mean, obviously they got rid of Jack Ross, they got rid of Sean Maloney, they need a new manager in, but I think for me one of the biggest things, and I spoke about this earlier, recruitment. When they lost Martin Boyle, they didn't replace him. Should Hibs recruitment have been better than what it has been so far?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, they've not recruited in the forward areas. Chris Miller's been a flop. There's no other way of getting around it. And Hibs weren't proactive enough as far as I was concerned. I mean, what didn't help was obviously the transition from Jack to Sean, because Jack and Sean both two different ways of playing. They had two different philosophies of playing. And for me, that takes time. And Hibs, in my honest eyes, shouldn't have sacked Jack when they did. They sacked him just before the cup final. And for me, it was a little bit disrespectful in my eyes, especially after the victory Hibs picked up over Rangers. And Hibs have paid the price of that. They've bared the repercussions. And for me, Hibs haven't been in a good position since. Now, Jack Ross wasn't exactly doing well in the league terms with Hibs. I understand that. But at the same token, football is big in terms of stability. Football players like stability in managers. If Jack Ross had stayed, I think it'd have been a much more comfortable changing him than what it turned out to be. And I think Sean Maloney got some good results out of the doors, but then failed to pursue a good run of fixtures and picked up a lot of inconsistencies in his role at Easter Road, which ultimately led to him departing a few weeks ago.
I mean, Dave, we just said to James there, but where do Hibs go from here in terms of management? Who are they going to bring in?
I think it's a good question. I do agree with James. I think the higher the age, the better the calibre and appointment it will be for Hibs. Darren Ferguson would be good. Michael Appleton, I noticed, has been in for the role, and he was in beforehand, and due to financial meetings around how Hibs operate in the management front, I don't think he wanted to take the role on. Tony Mowbray, I seen, was quoted in for the job. For me, I think he'd remain man. I think Tony Mowbray would be an exciting appointment for Hibs.
James, if we'll go on Aberdeen in a minute, but if you look at that Hibs team, now, yes, managers always get sacked when results are poor, but surely Hibs players have got to step up and do a lot more than they have done recently.
I think that's true of any football player. You know, obviously the manager has to carry the can because he's the guy that picks the team, tells them what the tactics are going to be. But once the players go across that line, whatever happens on that pitch, there's very little the manager can do to affect it other than take somebody off, you know, and put somebody else on. But I think the fact that Hibs didn't do anything really last summer in terms of bringing in new recruits was a big mistake. And it just went downhill basically from there. And as Dave said, getting rid of Jack Ross the way they did was scandalous. And I like Sean Maloney. I always have. You know, when he was a player, I was a huge fan of his. I think it was just a step too far for him at this point in his career. So I think the Hibs board and the man in charge at Hibs, the boss, the big boss, the man who owns it, really has to carry the can on this one. And he should be putting his hand up and saying, you know, yeah, I completely got it wrong.
Here's a question for you, James. And I'll ask David this in a minute as well. I just thought about this a minute ago. In terms of like Sean Maloney and guys like Ian Cathro, guys that kind of learn their trade in the game, should it not be that they go to maybe a lower league club and get a bit more experience before they get a bigger job, like Hibs, like Hearts, like Aberdeen, for example?
Well, certainly, historically, that was the way things were often done. You know, an ex-player who was going into management would go, you know, to a lesser team, in inverted commas, and then, you know, would get the opportunity to come back. But it doesn't seem to work that way anymore. You know, that clubs are looking for instant success, you know, because there's huge financial rewards in football, even by Scotland standards. You know, there's huge financial rewards for clubs. But that then means that the owners take hasty decisions, shall we say, appointing somebody who maybe talks a great game at the interview, but then when it comes to putting that into practice on the training field and in the actual games, possibly can't live up to it. I'm not saying that's what happened with Sean Maloney, but, you know, that could be the case. I mean, I know from personal experience, I've gone on job interviews and I've been absolutely scintillating in the interview. already knowing that if I got the job, I would probably be terrible at the job. You know, I remember many years ago getting an interview for a job where one of the things you had to do was know how to use computers. I'd never seen a computer at that point in my life, but I knew how to type. And I just thought, well, that's going to be similar to typing, surely. And I blagged my way into the job. And on the first day in the job, I went into the office and I sat down behind a desk and a computer in front of me. And I went, and one of the people that was in the office came over and said, "Do you know what you're doing?" I went, "I haven't got a clue, man. I've got absolutely no idea." I says, I recognise the keyboard because I can type. I says, but other than that, and he says, well, "I'll show you what you do, but I'm only going to show you once." I says, "You'll only have to show me once." And I was off and running.
And see, you've done so well for yourself ever since then, haven't you? Look at that.
Look at me now. I'm a star of the locker room, or a monster of the locker room.
Oh, definitely a star. Definitely a star. Dave, in terms of Sean Maloney, is it just a case that the job was too big for him?
Probably. I mean, he has worked with some of the biggest players in the world, such as De Bruyne and Eden Hazard and other players in that Belgium team. And you do learn a lot from working with these caliber of players. But it's nothing compared to the proximities, the pressures, the everyday measurements that come with football management. It's a totally different dimension altogether. I mean, when you look at the management and coaching's obviously helping the manager. It's helping the players. You can kind of have a rapport with the players. If you're a manager, totally different. You roll the roost over everything. And for me, it was a job too early and a job too big, yes, for Maloney.
I'm going to make myself comfortable here because I'm now going to ask Dave about Aberdeen. Now, this could be a very long list, but I'm going to ask him anyway. Aberdeen are sitting ninth in the league. I'm just going to ask a simple question here, and anyone who's watching this as well, any Aberdeen fans can join in this as well. Dave, where is it all going wrong for Aberdeen?
Yeah, I'm not Michael McEwen, so I'll keep this short and sweet to James's delight. In terms of Aberdeen, the experiment didn't work, first and foremost, with Stephen Glass. That was telling early doors. Now Stephen Glass was innovative in his approach, taking big players such as Scott Brown and Declan Gallagher and Christian Ramirez was a good signing. Eddie Bajour was a good success story out of Stephen Glass, and he needs to be applauded for that. So that's a huge positive within itself. But in terms of that, it was very disappointing to beat Hearts and Hibs 2 consecutive weeks at Pittodrie, and that was a fairly positive outcome for Aberdeen. You looked at that and went, can the tide change? But then they went to Dundee United and they went to somebody else. No, they played home to Motherwell. We're waiting Dundee United and had two defeats in the bounce, and it was here we go again. A few victories here and there, but then nobody can beat big Graham Alexander's Motherwell with the exception of the victory over St Johnstone. Haven't picked up a victory in this calendar year. That was pretty disappointing. Goodwin's came in, changed things. He's made decisions prematurely in my eyes, but in the same token, its decisions I think have been justified. When you look at this Aberdeen side, there needs to be 6 or 7 players getting brought in. I think Goodwin's been proactive. He seems like a busy man. I know through speaking to somebody that's a podcaster that the directors of the football at the club is doing 16, 17-hour days at this precise moment in time because how busy it is, how they want to get transfer deals in, how they want to look at decisions regarding players. And Aberdeen have already got rid of 3 youth players this week, 3 players that I wouldn't say had bright futures at the club, but the 3 players that did offer something and could offer something to the first team pitch at Pittodrie. Luke Turner was at Cliftonville, had a hugely successful season in Northern Ireland, had huge gratitude from the Northern Irish football community. Tyler McKeiter was maybe a different story because he was in and out high league teams and wasn't doing too well, so understandable. Michael Roof was at Falkirk and didn't hit the ball rolling there, so that's entirely understandable. But I'm going to do this question in a totally different terminology here by looking ahead to the next season by saying that, yeah, Goodwin needs 6 or 7 players to bolster the squad. And then after that, it's about preparing to see where they can get. I think Ross County has to be the benchmark for Aberdeen, where Marky Mackay's came in. They got off to a dreadful start. They had a lot of stumble blocks, such as COVID. And Marky Mackay's came in, sort of system, sort of philosophy, and got the most out of it. And Goodwin's philosophy has been different now. When he was at St Mirren, it was about signing players on 1 year deals to keep them in the league. Now it's about a 3-year plan, as far as I'm concerned, to get the Dons challenging, not for the league, but challenging at the European level again, every season upon season upon season. But not only that, it's also an exciting time to be in Aberdeen Football Club of an official member or indeed fan, because you've got the new stadium perhaps, you've got a range of exciting projects that Dave Cormack's lining up. If I mean, this is a big season for Dave Cormack rather than Jim Goodwin, because for Cormack, he needs to right the wrongs of last season. And that's all I'm going to finish. So back to you, Graham Duffy.
I'm glad that we're sitting back and relaxing and really fell asleep. My mom joking. But I mean, I think, James, if you look at, like, apart from Celtic and Rangers, any team in that league can have a poor season and be in the bottom 6. But for a team like Aberdeen to be sitting 9th in the league, I mean, it's a massive disappointment for them. They are a massive club. We all know that. As our Hibs are a big club. But it's just been such a poor season for Aberdeen.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I think to myself, how much are the players not understanding, whatever the new manager is trying to get across to them? Because it's very rare at any football club that you appoint a new manager and he'll play exactly the same way as the guy who's just gone. So they all want to get their own ideas over. And, I do think to myself sometimes, maybe the players don't quite grasp, what the boss is telling them to do. But again, Aberdeen, I had high hopes for them at the start of the season. I really did. I thought it was a very astute signing to get Scott Brown to go there. And I thought he was going to be the rock on which, they would found that team. And that didn't work out for whatever reasons. And I think, I might be wrong, Dave will maybe be able to tell us this. I think some Aberdeen fans, or maybe even a lot of Aberdeen fans, will be ruining the fact that they lost Derek McInnes, because he, for all intents and purposes, was pretty successful with Aberdeen. They were getting into Europe, they were challenging in the cup competitions, etc. They were up there or thereabouts, for third position and stuff like that. And then it's all just come crashing down round about their ears.
Yeah, Dave, I was going to ask you about that, actually. There were some Aberdeen fans that, weren't overly disappointed that Derek McInnes left, but is it a case of the grass isn't always greener?
He passed the sell-by date. I'll add that to it. Should he have stayed? Yes, but in the same token, his sell-by date passed. For me, we need to focus on a new chapter now. Last season's been and gone. The best clubs have these seasons. Celtic last season, evident with Neil Lennon. They had a pitiful season. Hearts have had disastrous seasons. Hibs have had disastrous seasons. Dundee United had a disastrous season 6 years ago. So for me, it happens. It's football.
So on tomorrow's game, let's have predictions. I'm going to start with Hibs 2, Aberdeen 1. Dave, what's your thoughts?
1-1 draw.
And James?
1-0 Hibs.
1-0 Hibs. Sorry, Aberdeen fans, hope there's nobody watching, but it's been a disappointing season. But let's move on to somebody who it's not been a disastrous season for. What I like that is seamless. Is Ross County. Now, Ross County are sitting 5th in the league. They've had a fantastic season. Malky Mackay was up for Manager of the Year. I think, again, Dave, start of the season, I don't think anybody could have imagined how good Ross Kent would be this season, but it's been a fantastic season for them.
Yeah, as I said, they had stumbling blocks at the beginning of the season with COVID and things like that, but you always saw early doors that Ross County were recruited very well. And they brought in some very astute reinforcements. Ross Calkin did very well. Hamilton came in and did very well. Hungbo's been a tremendous signing. Charles Cook stepped up massively. And if he stopped Dingwall, then there's something wrong as far as I'm concerned. Lane Was came in, done well. They brought another goalkeeper called Ash Maynard Brewer, who's been tremendous. He's obviously picked up an injury, so that's rather unfortunate for him, and he's back to Charlton now. Dominic Samuel not exactly hit the heights, but he came in and was okay in pre-season and had a few injuries, so it was unfortunate from his part. But yeah, in terms of Ross County, been a hugely successful season for them, and what may it continue? And they've got a very winnable home game tomorrow against Motherwell. And Marky Mackay is slowly but surely making the Global Energy Stadium, I used the Sunday one there, into a fortress. And yeah, in terms of Ross County, they've always been a tough nut to crack in Dingwall. And that's probably because they're travelling involved for other teams, because you've got a minimum 2.5 3 hour travel going up to Dingwall. I know all the professionalisms and all that kind of stuff, but there's not a lot of teams that have went to Dingwall and picked up big results. I think Celtic were the last side to do so, and that was for a very, very long time. I think Celtic won the last game at Dingwall prior to them coming back to Dingwall. So it shows that it's a tough nut to crack for teams, and it's also a tough place. And Motherwell's going to find it very, very, very hard there tomorrow.
James, I know that guys like Kyogo, Morelos, Kevin Nisbet have been out injured for quite a bit this season. But I think for Reagan Charles Cook to be sitting as top scorer in the league is absolutely phenomenal. What a season he's had for Ross County.
Do you know what? I had never even heard of the guy. I'll be completely honest. At the start of the season, looking at a Ross County team, if their game was on TV and seeing his name on there, I would have been like, who's he? But he has been an absolute revelation, and long may it continue. And as Dave says, I would be surprised if he's still at Dingwall next season. But it's where does he go? That's the big question. Does he stay in Scotland and, for talking sake, go to Aberdeen or to Hearts, for instance? Or does he go back down to the other side of the border to, a championship club or whatever? Although it's not as the same as being, say, Celtic or Rangers, as a phrase you used earlier, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And a point, in fact, to that was I was reading a thing today about Gary Hooper. Do you remember him?
I do, yeah.
He had some great times at Celtic. And at one point, I believe Neil Lennon at one point hailed him as being world class and the best striker at Celtic since Henrik Larsson. I think that was just a little bit too much to say. He went for £5 million to Norwich and didn't set the header on fire. And he's now playing in Australia. I can't remember the name of the team he's in, but he spent some time in India with the Kerala Blasters. Try saying that when you're drunk. So it just kind of shows, that you're a big fish in a wee pond and you move to the bigger pond, and unfortunately you're just a wee fish in that big pond. So that would be my worry for somebody like Reagan Charles Cook. Maybe another year doing well for Ross County, or, as I said, maybe moving to the likes of an Aberdeen or a Hearts, for instance, and going forward with them, and then, looking at a bigger club again.
Because we are so professional on the show, I can tell you that Gary Hooper plays for Wellington Phoenix in New Zealand.
I knew it was something to do with bits, but I wasn't sure.
Boom, boom. That's a Kinder Egg joke, that, honestly.
And do you know what the club anthem is? I bet you don't.
I've got a funny thing you're going to tell me.
Yeah, it's If It Wasn't For Your Wellies.
Excuse me.
See, people are just like this show is not edited. It really isn't. We make this stuff up as we go along. It's great. But in terms of Reagan Charles Cook, Dave, is he a player that Jim Goodwin will be looking at for Aberdeen?
I think he has to. I mean, Aberdeen have been lacking massively in creativity. I mean, defensively as well, there's a lot to be desired defensively as well. But going forward, Aberdeen have struggled massively. Vicente Bajur would driving that team with Regan, Charles Cook in it, it'd be similar to Hungbo and Charles Cook. I think you'd have Bazouja on one side, and then you have Charles Cook either in the middle with Lewis Ferguson, you'd have Charles Cook out wide. I think it would offer a lot of excitement. Also, a player that I think Aberdeen should be going for is Conor Rowan at St Mirren. And if they can get Charles Cook in, it'd be a massive acquisition for Aberdeen, yeah.
In terms of the team that Ross County are taking on tomorrow in Dingwall, it's Motherwell. Now, I don't want to be disrespectful to any Motherwell fans watching this, but James, they've only won one game this year. How on earth have they got in that top six?
It is a bit of a mystery, isn't it? You know, you would think for a team that has such a low win ratio, they'd be fighting relegation, really. But then that just kind of shows, you know, the power of draws. You know, you get enough draws, you get enough points on the board, and if the teams round about you are having a particularly bad time as well, then, you know, it bolsters you. I thought that Motherwell would be probably sixth in the top six this season before the whole thing kicked off. I was very surprised at how they seemed to go downhill so quickly. It really was. And to be honest, I know...
You've muted yourself, James.
Oh, sorry. A lot of people were saying, you know, that they should never have got rid of Tony Watt scoring goals, etc., etc. But there's no guarantee that he would have continued on, you know, and that would have kept him, you know, going for the top six. He's not exactly set the heather alight up at Dundee either. So, you know, it's swings and roundabouts. But I would expect Motherwell right off this season and start to look to get something together to challenge next year.
Do you know the crazy thing is? They're only 4 points off Dundee United in fourth place. They could still technically get fourth place, which, given the fact they've won one game this year, would be absolutely crazy.
Yeah, but do you know what? Looking at it logically, I really wouldn't expect them to win tomorrow against Ross County. I really wouldn't. You know, it's one of those games that if you're putting a football coupon on, that would be the coupon buster. You know, because you'd go for Ross County for the home win, and Motherwell would go up there and get the away win. You know, and it really would be the coupon buster. But I don't think they've got it in them. You know, and to a certain extent, you know, I'm not saying that they will do this, but to a certain extent, the players might be thinking, well, it's time to down tools, you know, and let's get ourselves sorted out for next year.
There are occasions where people think that a particular club is a one-man team. Do you think that was the case in Motherwell with Tony Watt?
I think they relied very heavily on him. I don't think it was a case that it would have been looked upon as being a one-man team, but he was certainly the shoulders, if you like, that the burden for scoring goals would have been gone heavily on. I honestly thought that Kevin Van Veen would have been up there with him. You know, the two of them would create a great partnership and they'd be scoring a barrel load of goals, but that didn't work out either. And that's not to say that, you know, they should get rid of Kevin Van Veen. I think he's a good player. But I think Motherwell just got to write off this season and look to next.
Dave, there are some Motherwell fans that I have heard that have been talking about Alexander, you know, should be sacked. Now, the guy is 6, but they've only won one game this year. Can you understand why Motherwell fans are frustrated?
Yeah, because you want to be consistent in football. That's the most important thing in my eyes. I mean, it's been a really, really good season for Motherwell by their admission because, I mean, fresh in top 6 is really, really good. I mean, had Motherwell been on the other side of the scale, a lot of Motherwell fans would have been speaking about relegation, and probably understandably so, I mean. So, in terms of Motherwell, they've got that safety net in terms of the split. For me, Alexander needs to win the games of football. Now, I think the next 2 Saturdays give them that opportunity. They've got Ross County tomorrow, which will be a hard game, yes, and then they've got Hearts. Celtic could be a bit of a free hit as far as I'm concerned. But you've got Motherwell and Hearts, Ross County and Hearts. Ross County is a similar calibre of opponent, and Hearts will be in cup final mode. So for me, it's two terrific opportunities for Graham Alexander to go get some results here. And if they don't, I would give Alexander to end the season. I give him 3 games to go and get a result of some magnitude. And then, if it's not going to go to plan, bring somebody in. I don't think Motherwell should panic. No, is my message. Because, and I think they've done this a good time frame. Because they have a bit of leeway in terms of time. I'm a big believer that the manager wants to get the work done during the course season and not just brought in at Christmas time like Hibs did. I thought Hibs got that horribly, horribly wrong. And Motherwell would have a good 4, 5, 6 weeks to look at things, building things, working things prior to the Premier Sports kicking off in July. So for me, if you're going to get rid of Alexander, now, because you need time to go work on it. You can't just go and panic.
Predictions for tomorrow, Ross County against Motherwell. Dave, I'll start with you.
Sorry, I muted myself there just for a minute. We'll go for 2-1 Ross County.
And James?
2-0 Ross County.
I'm going to go 2-0 Ross County as well, so that's probably guaranteed Motherwell to win because my predictions, as we know in the show, are usually terrible.
I know, take it back and go for something else. Don't upset.
Okay, I'll go for a 0-0 draw. There we go. That'll be a high score again that I said that. So let's move on to Livingston against St Johnstone. Now, this game really for Livingston, a dead rubber, they're 7th, nothing to play for. St Johnstone, I think they probably will be in the playoff. I can't see them really winning enough games to get out of that. Dave, what's your feelings for this game tomorrow, Livingston, St Johnstone? I
don't agree with the fact there's a dead rubber for Livingston because that's not Martindale's mentality. But Martindale's mentality is let's get as high as possible. Finishing 7th to 10th could mean a lot for Livingston financially. Livingston's not exactly the biggest corporate in terms of resources, finance, bringing in players, whatever have you. Martindale's done a tremendous job since arriving at the Tony Macaroni Arena. I mean, he's taken a good calibre of player. He's exceeded his own expectations, but he's also exceeded a lot of expectations within fans of Scottish football. And for me, if he was to go and let his players let their hair go and dry down over the next 3 months, I think he'd be bitterly disappointed. And Martindale's not the type of character that will go and do that. As for St Johnstone, they're a side that were obviously striving to get some wins. I think it's a big week for them coming up, but I also think there's a terrific opportunity there. They play the Livingston side, who, terrific incentive there. Aberdeen's not firing on all cylinders, got them on Wednesday. And then on Sunday, they'll play. Who will they play on Sunday? They'll play. I forgot who they play, but St Johnstone have a good opportunity to get some momentum because if they are that 11th place side, momentum's a big thing in football, and they'll need that going into the playoffs against either Arbroath, Inverness, or Partick Thistle.
Yeah, and I think James, in terms of Livingston, I think at the start of the season, do you think the expectation level would have been for them just to stay in the league, or would it have been higher than that?
No, I would expect it to have been higher than that. I think to a certain extent they'll be a wee bit disappointed that they weren't in the top 6. Because unless you're really bad and you spend an entire season at the bottom end of the table, you've got to be thinking of getting into that top half. And I think Livingston potentially could have got there. I agree with you a little bit in as much as potentially it is a dead rubber for Livingston tomorrow. But as Dave said, it's not really because there's still things to play for them. And for St Johnstone, it's vital to get the win tomorrow. I think it's absolutely vital. And if they get the win tomorrow, I think that'll set them up for the next 2 games. And hopefully, personally for me, St Johnstone remain in the Scottish Premier League.
Yeah, and I think just looking at St Johnstone, Dave, if you look at it, I mean, again, we talk about the fact that Callum Davidson, he won the Cup double last season, and then this season they're in relegation trouble. And let's be honest, you've got to think that whether they play Arbroath, Partick or Inverness, I mean, I think any one of those championship sides will fancy their chances against St Johnstone.
Yeah, well, I've seen St Johnstone played Hibs final day just to clarify to the viewers, so that's a terrific opportunity for 9 points out of 9. Let's be honest in that regard, but I think whoever finishes that will spot, whether it's Johnson or any other team, they've got a tough assignment coming up in the playoffs. Because I mean, we see it with Partick and Vanessa on Tuesday night. It was a little bit the same again tonight. It was a really good, hotly contested encounter between two good sides, two sides that have been consistent in the championship this season. Calais went under the radar a little bit because of the disappointing running that went on, but in the same token as well, they've been a side that have strung out some big wins this season. Beat Kilmarnock a few weeks ago, which was vital. It wasn't exactly a result that helped in terms of the title race, but because Kilmarnock eventually won at the end, of course. But Calais are capable of getting that big result, and I think they showed a good mentality that night, especially with Kilmarnock being 1-0 up. Partick, they're capable of playing some good football. Then Arbroath, you know what you get with Arbroath. Fit team. They're part-time by name. That's it. Full part-time by name. They're not part-time in terms of professionalism because they do things full-time. And that needs to be acknowledged as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think it does get acknowledged enough that Campbell's done a wonderful job at Gayfield Park. He wants Arbroath to the top flight. They might be part-time in the top flight, understandably so, but he wants Arbroath to the top flight.
James, at the end of last season, we were talking about potentially Callum Davidson being player of the manager of the year. He won the cup double. They were in the top 6. They had a fantastic season. But as we all know, as I said earlier, this can happen to anybody. You can have a poor season, and this has been a really, really disappointing season for St Johnstone. And there was a lot of St Johnstone fans who were thinking Callum Davidson should be sacked, which was harsh after last season. But you can understand why a lot of folk were saying that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, it was an absolute nightmare season for them. But again, it goes back to getting rid of players. Well, not getting rid of players, but, you know, selling players and then not really bringing in like for like or better, if possible. And I suppose, I don't know, maybe there was a wee bit of a bounce effect there, you know, that they were on such a high of getting the 2 cups the season before that they were perhaps maybe set up for that fall this season. Personally, I don't really agree with that kind of thought, but I can see how some people would. I think it would have been harsh if they had got rid of Callum Davidson, but I was quite surprised he's still there because after the run that they've had this season and the success from last season, I kind of thought, you know, after Christmas, I thought he was probably going to get the bum. But he's still there. And again, you know, as I said, I think St Johnstone should be in the Premier League.
Dave, in terms of Livingston, David, next season, where do you think David Martindale will be looking to strengthen? What areas do you think he'll be looking to try and recruit next summer? You're on mute, Dave.
Yeah, I'm on mute. sorry, I've had a few issues with technology and everything. So, apologies for that.
You smooth there, Dave.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on outgoings because Livingston are a club that operate in a balance. They're not exactly a bring in more than we have to kind of club. They're a outgoing, incoming type of club. So strikers, I think they're fine. I think Jack Hamilton will come in and do well. He's been brilliant at Arbroath. John Newbley's been brilliant as well. Bruce Anderson's been firing all cylinders for Livingston this year. So in terms of strikers, well and truly fine. Midfielders, maybe need 1 or 2 in the central midfield area. Alan Forrester, a lot will depend on what happens for him because he's been terrific for Livingston this year. I think he'll get interest. I think like Dundee United and other clubs will come in for him. Defensively, but okay. Maybe need 1 more. And then you've got Stryek in goals. If they can keep him, I think they'll be fine. So for me, probably 3 additions needed. I'll probably go for centre half and a centre midfielder.
So let's make predictions for tomorrow. Livingston against St Johnstone, and I'll start this time with you, James. What's your prediction for this one?
I would love it to be St Johnstone getting the win, but I think Livingston will probably win 2-0.
And Dave?
I'm going to go for a bit of a goal fest. Actually, I'm going to go for 2-1 Livy.
And I am going to go for, what will I go for this one? I'm going to go 1-0 Livingston. I don't think it'll be a classic, but I think Livingston might just sneak it by the odd goal. So if we look at the next game tomorrow, St Mirren against Dundee. Now, again, we talk about new manager effect, Dave. A lot of St Mirren fans still not convinced by Stephen Robinson. What's your thoughts on St Mirren?
I can fully understand where they're coming from. And then I must add here, there was a very, very big 3 points against Johnston, and that ultimately will help St Mirren moving forward. Do St Mirren have the credentials to be a Premiership side next season? Not at this precise moment in time. They'll need to bring in players. But this is where the whole manager coming in during the season crack doesn't work, because Robinson's ultimately got a Jim Goodwin team. And Robinson will want to bring in his own players. I think he's already started doing that. Any players that have came in from other clubs have tended to be from Motherwell or England, and not the players that Robinson knows. So he's going for the Stephen Robinson methodology rather than a St Mirren Football Club methodology. Goodwin was good in terms of St Mirren Football Club methodology, where he could take in players from anywhere. Robinson has his favourites, and that's a massive thing for me. But you're up against a Dundee side that Mark McGee likes to talk his way through the press, which is fine, but he hasn't been able to get any successful so far this season. I thought if I don't mind, Graham, I thought he handled the Charlie Adam thing at Baton to the last weekend very poorly to the press. He spoke to the written media and he spoke to BBC, and I thought he handled the whole thing very poorly. And for me, for a manager that's been in the game for 40 years, even although a lot of people will describe him as a dud, I thought he should handle it a lot better.
Yeah, and I think, see if, James, you look at Dundee, I mean, I've talked about this before, the new manager bounce, and let's be honest, it's not really worked for Mark McGee, has it?
No, and, Mark McGee primarily would have been hired based on the fact that he's had a lot of success in the past of keeping, teams in divisions. And it's just not worked for him this time round for whatever reason. They're a team that, again, historically, Dundee are a team that should be there or thereabouts, kind of like mid-table, lower half of the top half of the table. But for successive seasons, that's just not been going to get there. And they made the mistake, when they sacked their manager, in my opinion, and then they brought in Mark McGee. They should have stuck it out for the season to see whether or not, they could be rescued. But I fully expect them to be going down to the Championship without any stops on the way.
Dave, assuming, which I think we will, that Dundee are going to be down, do you see them coming up for a while? Because that Championship is a very difficult league to get out of.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a difficult league. I mean, you've seen it with United, Hibs and Hearts in recent years, and even Rangers had to have an extra season in the Championship before they eventually came up. Yeah, it's not an easy league to get out of. Any manager does it deserves a lot of credit as far as I'm concerned. The Championship's one of the best leagues in this country, and it always offers a surprise out of nowhere. And for me, Dundee will have to be very proactive in the summer if they're going to do something. Relegation will likely be a formality by, I would say, Tuesday evening. So for me, go and rebuild. Go and get a new manager. Jack Ross has been touted for that job. Brilliant appointment. Go and get him in. Get him in next week after. Allow him to build his own team.
James, Dave talks about a rebuild there. In terms of St Mirren, what would your expectation level be for them next season? Would they be kind of, again, avoiding relegation, or again, should their sights be higher than that?
Well, the sights should always be higher, let's be honest. It will come down to whether or not, as Dave said, they follow Stephen Robinson's path, or if they want to continue with the path that St Mirren have had for quite a while now, whereby they bring people in to keep their head above water. And, then they move on and then they bring in another player to do the same thing. I think Stephen Robinson's the kind of guy that would want to build a team that is going to challenge to get to the top six. And to do that, he's going to have to get backed by the management at St Mirren, who have, generally speaking, supported their managers over the years within the framework that they have from a financial standpoint. But I would think, I would like to see St Mirren being there or thereabouts for the top six spaces next year.
Dave, just looking at Dundee again, obviously, if they're in the Championship next season, what kind of players are they going to be looking to recruit? And is it likely that a few of the players who've got there just now are probably going to leave because they don't want to play in the Championship next season?
Well, Charlie Adam is going to be a formality. It's yet to be confirmed yet, but it looks like he's away at the media work each season full time, so he'll be one. I think they will keep on a few players, but there'll be players that are experienced, players that aren't going to get interest from Premiership clubs. For me, they need to attract young players, similar to like Max Anderson and Finlay Robertson, but then have that experience alongside that. That's exactly what Dundee have done this season, but they need fresh players in. For me, some of the players they've had haven't been good enough, and they need a fresh influx of players as far as I'm concerned.
So let's make predictions for tomorrow then, and I'm going to start with, I just don't see Dundee winning. I think it'll be 2-0 St Mirren. James?
I would say 3-0 to St Mirren.
And Dave?
1-0 the Buddies.
1-0 the Buddies. And the final game this weekend is on Sunday. It is Rangers, European finalists, against Dundee United. Now, you would think that the Rangers players would be on a massive, massive high after that game last night. There's every chance they're going to go into this game at 9 points behind, with Celtic beating Hearts tomorrow. James, in terms of the league, it probably is done, but it could still be a massive game this for Rangers on the back of that game last night.
Absolutely. I mean, from a Rangers perspective, what they have to do over the next series of games up to the two finals is to stay consistent and keep winning. They can't afford to sort of sit back on their laurels, if you like, and say, well, you know what, we made it to the Europa League final. We can rest now in the league. That's just not going to work for them. They've struggled against Dundee United this season. And in theory, you would expect that to be the same at the weekend. However, I think the players will be on such a high from getting to the Europa League final that they'll just run over the top of Dundee United.
Do you think it'll be a case that Van Bronckhorst might look to maybe rest a few players tomorrow, because there'll be a lot of heavy legs in that team, and maybe freshen it up a little bit?
It would make sense. You know, they've had quite a heavy schedule, you know, with extra time games and stuff like that, you know, so it would make a bit of sense. But he's also got injuries that, you know, you've got to ask yourself, you know, if these guys like Kamar Roof, you know, if he's not available, you know, what are we going to, you know, who are we going to fill in those positions? I take what Dave was saying about, or was it you that was saying about Fashion Sakala earlier? I just don't think he's consistent enough yet. But, you know, I can see him being a very, very dangerous player going forward for Rangers. But I just don't think his consistency's there this season. But he has scored some big goals in some big games. So there's a potential there.
Dave, in terms of Dundee United, Thomas Coates has been fantastic for United this season. You know, they're sitting fourth, a very good chance that they're going to stay in fourth place. How do you think United will approach this game on Sunday?
Yeah, good question. I mean, United have got a job in hand, and that's to reach European football for next term, which the passports are out after last weekend's 1-0 win over Millwall. But you've got to make sure, as far as United are concerned, that the passports aren't out for just a fortnight. They want them to be out for a longer duration, and that preferably. And it'll be a tough assignment because Rangers on Sunday, they'll be that massive higher after last night. And I think a lot more will be on how the Rangers approach this game, because will they have the heights of Thursday night? Will the hangover start kicking in by Sunday afternoon? Or will Dundee United come in this with a fresh impetus? I mean, when you look at Dundee United, they've always had a big game against the Celtic or Rangers and been hugely, hugely competitive. And this will be no easy game for Rangers by any stretch of imagination this Sunday. United will have a game plan and they'll be striving to get all 3 points. I think Neil Levitt's got a huge part to play on Sunday. Getting in that midfield up against John Lundstrom, and then be up to Tony Watt to try and get some goals. Matt McNulty's out for Sunday, so that's a huge loss for United. But as far as United's concerned, I think Tony Watt and Nicky Clark work better up front together. So I think there's a lot to be thinking about ahead of Sunday, and it's going to be a huge test for Rangers and an opportunity for Rangers to get a hard-earned 3 points. for United, sorry, to get harder than 3 points.
In terms of Dylan Levitt, he's only 21. I mean, just how good could this guy get?
Oh, brilliant. I know 100%. He's been a top player for United. He was man of the match, understandably so, against Motherwell last weekend. And Levitt's got that creativity about him. He's also got a bit of tenacity about him as well. He's just a top player. And he was speaking to us after the game last Saturday. He was saying that talks are going to take place with Manchester United over the next 10 to 14 days. But there's a lot going on at Manchester United right now. The new manager coming in, and there's going to be a whole transition period at that club. So I think in terms of Levitt, there is every possibility that he could be back at Tarn next season, which would be a major coup for Tarn Courts.
James, in terms of Rangers, obviously it does look like Celtic will win the league this season. Rangers could potentially get the Scottish Cup, hopefully not, and the European Cup as well. But next season, do you think this is a case that Van Bronckhorst has got to win the league next season and wrestle that back off Ange Postecoglou?
Well, that's got to be the target, hasn't it? Because if you're in Glasgow and you're Celtic or Rangers, the be-all and end-all is to be above whichever team when the season comes to an end. A lot will depend on how they invest in new players and if they get the right players to come in. They didn't really do a lot last summer, and possibly that might have had a knock-on effect in some respects. They're getting money in, regardless of whether they win, the Scottish Cup, regardless of whether they win the Europa League. They're going to have a sizable chunk of money coming to them at the end of this season. I know there's a lot of talk about, Rangers still being, in a lot of financial problems, but they have to find a way of dealing with that and maintaining the squad and improving the squad. There's a few players who possibly won't be there. I'm thinking in the terms of like maybe Connor Goldson and Borna Barisic. I think they might be away. I think possibly Ryan Kent could get that move to Leeds United. But we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, they've got to try and get the league back, because regardless of what happens, they're not going to be guaranteed to go into the Champions League the season after that again, unless possibly, they win the Premier League in Scotland. Of course, they could go into the Europa Cup final and win it again a second year in a row and get into the Champions League that way.
It could very easily happen. So let's go predictions. Let's start. James, Rangers United on Sunday, prediction.
I'm going to be quite controversial here, and I'm going to say 2-1 to Dundee United.
Dave?
1 each.
And I'm going to go 2-1 Rangers, just to be different. I'm only saying that because James was on the show. But would you believe we've only got 20 minutes, just over 20 minutes to go. It's been an action-packed show as always. Thank you for all the comments that you've put in. We're going to move on to something else very shortly, but I just want to quickly touch on the awards ceremony. I'm going to start with you, James, because this is basically a full Celtic sweep. Manager of the Year, Ange Postecoglou. Player of the Year, Callum McGregor. Young Player of the Year, Leila Bada. Women's Player of the Year, Jacinta. And Goal of the Season was Tom Rogic against Dundee United. Now, I'd imagine that you would agree with pretty much all of that, would you?
Yes, is the answer to that question. Although Goal of the Season is always quite a difficult one, I think, and I sometimes wonder why, there is an award for it. But Goal that won it, although I didn't vote for it, I can see why it won it. But I don't know. It always just seems to be that, whenever a team has a very successful season, generally speaking, they're the ones that are going to pick up those awards. And I said the other week when I was on that, I wouldn't have been disappointed if Dick Campbell had won the Manager of the Year. Because I think what he's done with Arbroath is just absolutely phenomenal. But unfortunately, they're not a glamorous team in that respect. So, you expected it. Callum McGregor, I think, was a stick-on for that award, without a doubt. He has been absolutely superb this season. I did have my doubts at the beginning of the season because a couple of times when he sort of deputised for Scott Brown, it seemed as if the captaincy was a wee bit too much for him. But he stepped into those boots and he filled them and did a great job. And you can see the pride in the guy every time he's on the park and he's been spoken to. He's so proud of the club. And let's not forget, not very long ago, there was a lot of talk about him moving down south. He's Celtic and probably has been proven correct to a certain degree.
Dave, do you agree with all those awards, or is there somebody different you might have given it to, i.e. Craig Gordon?
No, I agree with them all. The one that I wouldn't be agreeing on is the goal of the season. I think the goal of the season for me should have been Joseph Hungbo for Ross County against Dundee. But apart from that, I agree with all of them.
Now, I'm going to say something to you. I'm not saying this to be controversial. I'm only saying this because I saw this highlighted on Twitter, right? Now, a lot of folk have said that Ange Postecoglou shouldn't have got Manager of the Year because he's at Celtic with all the resources he's got. Now, I can understand part of that, but I also think that you've got a new manager that's coming from a different place. He's coming from Australia. He doesn't know the league. He's had to sign a lot of players. He's had to get recruitment right. And I think he's done a very good job. So I can understand why he's won that. But I also see the other side of that as the fact that Robin Nielsen could potentially win the Scottish Cup. He's finished third, got European football. And then you look at Dick Campbell. Dick Campbell could potentially get part-time or both to the Premier League. So I can understand a lot of these different suggestions, but I do think that Postecoglou probably was the right appointment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, last season, not a lot of people knew about him. Obviously, there was a whole mishap after the Eddie Howe scandal. Eddie Howe not taking the job at the very, very last minute. It meant Celtic had to be proactive. They had to recruit last minute. They did so, as Postecoglou, and the rest is history. What an achievement if they could go and win the Premier League title, because it'll be replicating what they did in the Premier Sports Cup. And for me, if Celtic win the double, good season.
I mean, personally, I think it shouldn't matter who the manager, the club that he's at. That should not come into the thoughts at all when you only pick him for the Manager of the Year. It should be based on what he's done. And certainly Robbie Nielsen, very, very, worthy nominee. Dick Campbell, very, very worthy nominee. Yeah, Stevie Clark, again, very, very worthy nominee. I'm a wee bit biased, obviously, because I'm a Celtic supporter. And I think that Ange Postecoglou was the only choice. But that is based on the fact, as Dave said, he came in literally through the back door almost, had nothing to work with, struggled for the first few games. Then they started to buy into, his philosophy, and you started to see things change. And then obviously in January, he brought in, the Japanese boys, and it's just gone on from strength to strength. But not only that, he's taken players who looked as if they were on their way out at Celtic and turned them round. He's made Tom Rogic into the player he was a couple of seasons ago. Tony Ralston looked as if he was out of the door, and he is now vying, for that right back slot. Greg Taylor, he's a good professional. Personally, I think from a Scottish football perspective, he's a good left back, but I think he suffers in a lot of big games, especially in Europe. So we need to get somebody better as a left back. But he's done all that, and he's built it up, and he's taken the knocks, when he's had them, when they were doing quite badly at the beginning of the season, and he's turned it round, and he has been dogged in, his football philosophy. And you know what? I'm all for having a plan B, when a plan B is necessary, but you should stick to your guns, especially when it's working. And he has done that.
Yeah, now you will see at the bottom of the screen, the rolling banner at the bottom of the screen, some of the subjects we're talking about tonight. And one of them is something that I wanted to bring up. And it is, do managers get enough time? Now, the reason I want to bring this up is because obviously you've got Aberdeen who sacked Stephen Glass, they brought in Jim Goodwin. You've got Hibs that sacked Jack Ross and brought in Sean Maloney. You had obviously last season, Hearts won the league, but a lot of Hearts fans, myself included, I'm not going to lie, wanted Robin Nielsen out. So, Dave, I'm going to come to you first. Are managers getting given enough time? And how long, realistically, should a manager get to change things if things aren't going well?
Pardon me. Yeah, in terms of managers, I mean, football chairmen and football owners and football people in general are under pressure on a daily basis. I mean, there's no getting away from that. But in the same token, in 2004, 2005, 2006, when football was in a golden age, you were very seldom seeing managers getting sacked. Social media has changed the clap altogether here, because social media means that people are looking at football now and going, 4 games without a win, get him out, get him out. And the club chairman are instantly under pressure from there. The internet and technology has made the whole thing unravel big time. And it's unfortunate because we're losing some good guys from management jobs. I mean, we've had some guys that have been back from clubs. Now, I'm a big believer that if there was a job, they've got to be in the bottom 2 or the bottom 3, or they've got to be 8 games without a win or 10 games without a win. But I'm also a big believer in the same context that if you've been in a job for 4 months and not won 8 games, get the season, then bring somebody in. There's a whole host of initiatives and permutations that have to be looked at here as far as I'm concerned.
James, back in the bygone days of Vladimir Romanov at Hearts, we were sacking managers every week. You know, George Burley, probably one of the best managers we've ever had, was sacked after going unbeaten in 10 games. Now, every owner is different. Every owner wants different things. Success should be the main thing. But it seems like every manager is 3 or 4 games from the sack. And that obviously can't be right.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things here that has to be taken into consideration when somebody comes in to a football club. What do they have to do with what they've got available? Now, if a manager comes into a club and they're way down at the bottom end of the table and they're really struggling and the players aren't that great, he should be given a wee bit more time than, say, somebody coming into the likes of a Celtic, Rangers, Manchester United, Manchester City, who are a team that are flying and then they go on a bad run, you know, and they're like, oh, get him out the door. So, you know, I think that you have to take these things into consideration. Now, Sean Maloney, rightly or wrongly, was given the bump far too quickly, in my opinion. And what made it even worse was the fact that the guy that owns it then comes out, you know, and says that, well, you know what, we didn't really want to appoint him as the manager. Well, why did you appoint him? You know, the fans shouldn't be shouting at Sean Maloney. They should be shouting at the guy that's made that decision to bring him in. But that's not the way it works, unfortunately. It works by, you know, it doesn't even work by the fans really getting at the players. You know, it's always the manager that gets it in the neck. But as I said earlier, he is the guy ultimately that has to carry the can. It's his responsibility. But no, they don't get enough time. I always, whenever MD asks a question like that, I always say to them, well, do you know what? Do you remember when Alex Ferguson went to Manchester United and he had all these brilliant young players who were kind of like on the cusp of getting into that team, and they were on one of the worst runs of Manchester United's history. And he could easily have been sacked. In fact, there was a couple of managers prior to him who got sacked for the very same reasons. But do you know what? The board decided to stick with him. And the rest, as they say, is history, because he then brought in your Beckhams, you know, and all the rest of it, Giggs, all these guys. They all come in and they all did tremendously well. And of course, he brought in other players as well. You know, it wasn't just the young guys that had come up through the ranks. He brought in other players with a bit of experience. But it proves the point, you know, that if you give a manager enough time, if he's a good enough manager, then the success will start to come. Owners need to be a wee bit sort of circumspect when it comes to getting rid of people.
I'm sure Celtic fans will remember this, but you've just talked about Sean Maloney. You know, you talk about great players being really poor managers don't make great managers. Now, I remember quite a few years ago now when John Barnes got the Celtic job. Now, that was an absolute disaster. We all know the headline, supercalifragilistic Celtic are atrocious. I mean, that was just one of these things that just didn't work. Has there been any other manager at Celtic that you've thought, no, obviously John Barnes was given way too much time. Is there a manager at Celtic that you thought wasn't given enough time to change things or make things better?
Not so much that he wasn't given enough time. It was more his personal choice. But I always felt that Wim Jansen should have been at Celtic for far longer than he was. But that came down to disagreements between him and, the people at the top at the football club. It wasn't really down to, things that were going wrong on the field or anything like that. But see, Celtic, and to a certain extent Rangers as well, have always been clubs that, generally speaking, don't change managers quickly. They tend to keep the same guys, because they're being successful, obviously. So they stay in the job for a longer period of time. But yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent as well, I would have liked Ronnie Dyler to have remained at Celtic for a wee bit longer, and then obviously there's a classic, Brendan Rodgers, a lot of Celtic supporters still call him a snake and all this kind of stuff, and I understand where they're coming from. I completely understand where they're coming from. For me personally, I don't feel like that. He got a better offer and he moved. That's what happens. But I do wonder, had he been around longer, would it have been 10 in a row, 11 in a row, 12 in a row? Do you know what I mean? There's just no way of knowing because he was phenomenally successful when he was at Celtic.
Dave, if we look at obviously talking about managers here, but I mean, we talk about how long should managers get. Surely, I think for a prime example, surely managers need at least 2 or 3 chance windows to get things right. Like, look at Aberdeen, for example, right? Jim Goodwin's come in and he's having to use the players that Stephen Glass has got. Now, surely he will need at least 2 or 3 chance windows to get the team he wants and the philosophy that he wants.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I mean, when you go into a club, you've always got an identity about you. You've got a philosophy about you. You've always got a plan in your head. You've always got a plan in your head going, how are we going to do this within that time frame? How are we going to build on this? What's the long-term plan? Long-term longevity and football management is non-existent to me in modern football terms, but in the same context as well. A lot of managers are looking and saying, I want to get to that level by 2024. I want to be in European football by 2026. Now, if you're an Aberdeen, a Hearts, a Hibs, whatever have you, you've got to be in European football that same season. And that's not Champions League, that's Europa League. But for Celtic and Rangers, they need to be winning trophies or get to the latter stages of cup competitions. For Dundee, St Mirren, all these Hamilton, all these kind of clubs, their remit is to stay up. If things aren't going well in February, March, maybe understandable. But don't go sacking managers in October.
James, we obviously don't know what goes on inside boardrooms, but is it the case that maybe certain owners, certain chairmen have unrealistic expectations from the managers?
In some ways, I think it's because certain owners and directors don't really understand football. They're not the football men. They're investing in it as a business and they want to see a return on that investment. Now, if you're not winning cups and if you're not winning leagues, then you're not going to get that return on your investment. So then the pressure is on to try and find somebody that will get you that return on your investment. To a lesser extent nowadays, because when you think about the likes of Newcastle and Manchester City, they're owned by these multi-billionaire Arabs, who apparently have, deep pockets that are, inexhaustible. But the likes of Rangers and Celtic, their success has been built on always being successful. And they've always been successful because of the players that they either brought up through the ranks or invested wisely in, but more so because of the type of managers and people they had running the clubs. I mean, Celtic in particular, for many, many, many years, were in the control of the Kelly family. And a lot of Celtic supporters didn't like that. And I was one of them, because there were times when you felt Celtic had, like, when they won the European Cup in '67, right? They won 5 trophies that season. They should have been looking to go further and better, you know? That required some investment. It didn't happen. We played in the World Club Championship and they got kicked off the park. And they shouldn't have played the next game. They should have refused. But Bob Kelly knew that it was going to cost the club thousands. So they played. And the same thing happened again, you know. So I think they did well when they were there for some of the things, but I think in some instances you need to have people that have got a wee bit more vision than the likes of Bob Kelly had. That's not to say that Desmond White has got it right, you know, because he hasn't, you know, but there is no magic formula. You've just got to. They have a great system at Celtic at the moment, you know, and they have had since Fergus McCann saved the club, whereby they tend not to overspend, you know. You think about the times when David Murray was in charge at Rangers, you know, and they were spending literally millions upon millions of pounds on players. You can argue all day you want whether they were doing it legally or illegally. I'm not going to go down that road. But the point I'm making is he was trying to build a team to win the European Cup. And that was why he was spending that money, but it never happened. And ultimately, they got into a lot of trouble. Celtic made a decision back in the days of Fergus McCann that this is the level of finances, you know, and we want to build on that. And they're probably certainly the richest club in Scotland. They're probably one of the richest in the whole of the UK.
We have just about 4 minutes to go, and we have to mention the game tonight in the Championship. It is the second leg. It is Inverness against Partick Thistle. Inverness ahead by 2-1 after the first leg. Dave, how do you see this game going tonight?
Yeah, I think we've seen on Tuesday night how Cali showed a level of resilience to go and get the result, because Partick were a side that were on the ascendant side. They were a side that I know a bit more about them, but I thought Cali were a little bit more streetwise and got the result in the end. And, Shane Sutherland had a pivotal part to play. Billy Mackay did well get that goal. And also Samuel, he's not been great in Aberdeen, but he was brilliant in terms of getting that away goal. But I must say, that could be pivotal in the outcome of the game in terms of the chances Partick missed. The guy that missed his own goal from Rangers or something, I've forgotten his name. But he missed an absolute sitter, which flew over the bar. And for me, Cali have the lead headed tonight, and I think they'll see it through. I think Cali will go and play a Broth over next Tuesday, next Friday.
Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, I didn't see the first leg. I saw highlights of it, and I think that Inverness are in the driving seat. They can only lose it, you know. But again, it's like a one-off game. It's a cup final, you know. Partick Thistle could turn up and just completely overturn everything, but I don't think it will happen. I think it's going to be Inverness against Arbroath, and ultimately I think Arbroath are the team that are going to make it all the way to the Premier League.
Dave, I'm going to ask you, which team are going to be taking on what looks like St Johnstone in that playoff?
Arbroath. I've got to be biased.
Do you know what? I honestly, I've said this before. I really hope they do. I just think Dick Campbell thoroughly deserves that. He's a brilliant manager, and to see him in the Premier League would be absolutely phenomenal. And I think, James, you're not going to disagree. You're not going to disagree with that, are you? You want to see them up as well?
No, I do want to see them up. You know, I remember as a wee lad going on the supporters bus up to Arbroath, you know, on regular occasions to watch Celtic play Arbroath. And yes, for many, many years, they've not been anywhere near it. But I think this is their year. I really do think this is their year. They're going to get into the Premier League. It'll be bad, not bad, but it'll be hard for them as a part-time team to maintain the Premier League. But I would love them to get there and to stay up for at least, you know, another season after.
Well, it's been an absolutely fantastic show tonight, and it just remains for me to thank James E. and Mr. David Smith for joining me. I think we have Musical Musings with Steve B coming up after the show tonight. And tomorrow, as you will well know after last week, we have tomorrow morning from 10 till 1. He's going to miss the Hearts Celtic game. What a shame. James E will be on with his Saturday show tomorrow. So you have to listen to that. It's a great show. He didn't pay me to say that. It's generally true. So thank you for all the comments. Thank you for everyone that watched the Nil show tonight. And we shall see you same time next week, 5 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Ta-da! That should be you.